At every family gathering, they smiled at me, but their eyes said, "You don't belong here." I was the quiet one, the helper, the one who didn't come from money. One summer, my mother-in-law laughed and told her friend, "Emily's like a maid," who somehow ended up in a wedding dress. Everyone chuckled. I smiled back, but something inside me shattered. That night, I made a promise. If they thought I was just the help, then they'd soon learn what I was really capable of. And it all started with a beach house. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or laughed at by people who thought they were better than you, this story is for you. Stick around, because sometimes the sweetest revenge is quiet, poetic, and beachfront. My name is Emily. I'm a freelance writer, a woman who finds joy in the quiet moments of life, the early morning coffee, the smell of old books, and the rhythm of my fingers on the keyboard. I'm not flashy. I don't own expensive clothes or drive a fancy car. I live simply, and I like it that way. When I married into the Harrison family, I knew I was stepping into a world completely different from mine. The Harrisons were wealthy, influential, and proud. They built their fortune through generations of business ventures, luxury hotels, upscale real estate, and investments that spanned continents. They lived in a mansion that seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with priceless art and polished marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers. From the beginning, I was an outsider. I remember my first family dinner vividly. The room was buzzing with laughter and the clinking of fine china. Men in tailored suits exchanged business jargon, while women in designer dresses whispered and smiled with practiced grace. I sat quietly, my simple dress feeling out of place amidst their glittering attire. No one asked about my career or dreams. To them, I was the sweet girl who happened to marry their son, and yet behind their polite smiles lurked something else, a barely concealed disdain. I was the family's project, the one who needed to be guided, improved, and kept in her place. At parties, I was expected to be charming, but silent. At gatherings, I was told to help out, pour drinks, tidy up, entertain the kids. I was a ghost at my own wedding, overshadowed by their grandeur and expectations. Every year, the family escaped the city to their beach house in South Carolina, a sprawling, sun-drenched villa right on the Atlantic coast. It was their pride and joy, the place where the Harrisons celebrated milestones and made memories. They invited me along, but the invitation always came with an unspoken condition. I was there to serve. I was assigned the early morning chores, making breakfast, cleaning up, watching the children. Emily has the time, they would say, with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. She should be helping. The beach house itself was stunning. Whitewashed walls, large windows that opened to the sound of crashing waves, and a porch where they sipped cocktails as the sun set. It was the kind of place that made you forget the world, except for me. It was a reminder of my place always working, never belonging. Despite the cold shoulders and whispered jokes, I held onto my dignity. I reminded myself that my worth was not tied to their approval. Writing was my escape. My words were my power. I worked on my manuscripts in stolen moments, hiding drafts under beach towels, scribbling ideas in the margins of magazines. Over time, I learned to wear my invisibility like armor. I didn't argue or confront. I observed and planned. The family might have seen me as a servant, but I was quietly building a future they couldn't imagine. The house they boasted about, the family they flaunted, I was going to turn it all around. The annual family trip to the South Carolina beach house was always supposed to be a time for celebration, relaxation, and bonding. For the Harrisons, it was a lavish tradition, a way to flaunt their success and cement their social status. For me, it was a reminder of my position in their world, the invisible help. Each year, I was given the same role without asking, the unofficial caretaker of their summer retreat. While they lounged by the pool, sipping on expensive drinks and laughing over stories, I was tasked with preparing breakfast for the entire family, tidying up after their mess and keeping the kids entertained. It's because Emily has the time, my mother-in-law would say, with a sharp smile, as if I had no other responsibilities or dreams. She's practically part of the staff. I kept quiet. I told myself this was temporary, that one day they would see me differently. But their words stung, cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. One morning, as the sun peeked through the curtains and the salty ocean breeze drifted in, I was in the kitchen, making pancakes. The aroma filled the large open space where my husband and his family were still gathering in the living room. Suddenly, I heard my mother-in-law's voice carrying from the hallway loud enough for everyone to hear. Emily. "Oh, she's so sweet," she said with a sarcastic tone, kind of like a maid who somehow ended up in a wedding dress. The room fell silent for a moment. Then a few polite chuckles echoed around the room. My heart stopped. I stood, frozen spatula in hand, unsure whether to laugh or cry. No one looked my way. The insult hung in the air, heavy and humiliating. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words got stuck in my throat. I was caught between the instinct to defend myself and the desire to keep the peace. So I smiled, forced a laugh, and went back to my task. That moment was a breaking point. It wasn't just about the words. It was the countless little moments before the exclusion from conversations, the rolling eyes, the hushed whispers when I entered the room. It was the way they treated me as less than family, as a servant dressed in silk. But even in my silence, a fire was igniting inside me. I remembered the nights I spent writing, pouring my heart into stories no one else cared about. I remembered the dreams I had put aside to make this marriage work. I remembered the promise I made to myself that I would prove them wrong. They saw me as a nobody, a servant. But I was so much more than that. From that day on, I refused to be invisible. I began to observe the family dynamics more closely. I noticed their weaknesses, their secrets, and the cracks beneath their perfect facade. I paid attention to the business meetings whispered over dinner, the tension behind their smiles. Most importantly, I started investing time and energy into my writing career with renewed determination. Every rejection letter became fuel. Every late night was a step closer to my goal. Meanwhile, the family continued their rituals, unaware that the maid in the wedding dress was quietly planning her comeback. This conflict wasn't just about being mocked. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my identity, and my place in a world that had tried to push me aside. The summer after that humiliating remark was the hardest I've ever endured. At first, I tried to act as if nothing had changed. I showed up at the beach house with a smile, greeting everyone warmly. But inside, every glance, every word felt like a reminder of my place, invisible, unwanted, beneath their notice. My husband Mark seemed torn. He loved me. I knew that, but he was also his mother's son. The tension between us grew silently, like a slow-burning fire. One afternoon, while I was helping the children build sandcastles, I overheard a conversation between Mark and his mother. Their voices were low, but clear enough to make my heart ache. "Emily just doesn't fit in," my mother-in-law said coldly. "She doesn't have our background or our connections. She's holding Mark back." Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's family. We can't just cast her aside. She needs to know her place." My mother-in-law insisted. I wanted to run away, to scream, to disappear, but I stood my ground, even if it was only silently. That summer, the insults didn't stop. There were cold shoulders, whispered gossip, and subtle exclusion from family decisions. I was no longer just a maid in a wedding dress. I was a shadow, a nuisance. One evening at a dinner party, I reached my breaking point. The family was celebrating Mark's father's birthday. The dining room was adorned with crystal glasses and silverware, and the guests were dressed to impress. As usual, I was expected to play the perfect hostess smile. Serve. Stay quiet. Halfway through the evening, my mother-in-law leaned toward a guest and said loudly enough for me to hear Emily. "She's lucky to be here at all. Honestly, she's more like staff than family." I felt every eye shift toward me, the weight of their judgment crushing. I excused myself and fled to the porch where the cool night air hit my tear-streaked face. "Why do you let them treat you like this?" Mark found me there, his voice soft but conflicted. "I don't know," I whispered. "Maybe because I'm afraid of losing everything." He pulled me into a hug. "You don't have to do this alone." But the loneliness lingered. Days later, a harsh argument erupted between Mark and his mother. She accused him of choosing the help over his family. The words cut deep, but for the first time, Mark stood up to her. "Emily is my wife," he said firmly. "She deserves respect. You don't get to decide her worth." It was a small victory, but it meant everything. Still, the emotional toll was heavy. I questioned myself, my choices, my future, even my worth. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was just fooling myself to believe I could ever belong. But every time doubt crept in, I returned to my pie, writing my refuge, my proof that I was more than what they said. I poured my pain into stories of women who found strength through adversity, tales of quiet resilience and fiery revenge. And slowly, something shifted. One morning, while reading a rejection letter from a publisher, I realized I didn't need their approval. I had my own path. A plan began to form, one that didn't rely on their acceptance, but on my own success. The following months were a roller coaster of emotions, a constant battle between hope and despair. At the beach house, the Harrisons' cold treatment became almost unbearable. Every gesture, every word, seemed designed to remind me that I didn't belong. One afternoon, I tried to join a family discussion about the upcoming holiday plans. I wanted to contribute, to be part of something even if small. But as soon as I spoke, the room fell silent. My mother-in-law gave me a pointed look. "Emily, maybe you should focus on helping with the kids instead of talking about plans you don't understand." It wasn't just exclusion. It was a verbal slap. I bit my tongue, swallowing the sting. I wanted to shout to tell them I had ideas, opinions, that I was more than just a caretaker. But the fear of rocking the boat kept me silent. That night, in my small rented apartment, away from the mansion, I cried alone. The rejection wasn't just from strangers in the world, it was from the people who were supposed to be my family. I wondered if I'd made a mistake marrying into this world. Was I fooling myself to think I could ever be accepted? My relationship with Mark became strained. He tried to support me, but the pressure from his family weighed heavily on him. One evening, after a tense dinner, he confessed, "I don't know how to protect you from them. They're my family." His helplessness broke my heart. I realized I couldn't rely on anyone else to save me. I had to save myself. That realization sparked a new fire inside me. I threw myself into my writing with a fierce determination. Every rejection letter, every snide comment was fuel for my creativity. I wrote about women who were underestimated, betrayed, but who rose stronger and wiser. I wrote about the kind of revenge that wasn't just about payback, but about reclaiming power and dignity. The beach house, once a symbol of my humiliation, became the backdrop of my dreams. I imagined it as a place I could own, not as a servant, but as a queen. Months turned into a year. Slowly, I began submitting my work to publishers, attending workshops, networking with other writers. My stories found readers, my confidence grew. But the Harrisons didn't notice. They still treated me like a shadow. One particularly painful moment came during a family gathering. I had prepared a small speech to announce my first book's release, hoping to share my joy as I stood before them, my hands trembling. My mother-in-law interrupted. "Oh, Emily, you're so sweet," she said, a mocking smile on her lips. "We didn't realize you had a career outside of keeping the house in order." The laughter that followed was cold and sharp. I felt the room spinning. I wanted to disappear, but instead I stood taller. "I have more to offer than you'll ever see," I said, quietly meeting her gaze. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. That night, Mark and I talked for hours. He apologized for not standing up sooner, promising to be my ally. His support was a balm to my wounds, but the real fight was mine alone. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but resolute. I realized I couldn't change their minds, but I could change my fate. That was when I began planning in earnest. I researched the beach house, learned about the property market, talked to agents. I knew it would be difficult, but the idea of owning that house, the place where I had been humiliated, became my ultimate goal. The ultimate revenge. After months of relentless effort and sleepless nights, I finally had the breakthrough I'd been dreaming of. My first book was accepted by a reputable publisher. The advance wasn't huge, but it was enough to make me believe that change was truly within reach. With that small success fueling my resolve, I began to think bigger. I knew I couldn't just hope for acceptance from the Harrisons. I needed to flip the script entirely. That's when the idea hit me. The beach house, the very place where I was treated like a servant, like an outsider. What if I could own it? The thought alone sent a thrill through me. I started digging deep, into the property records, market prices, and rental contracts. The house was rented by the family every summer, but it was privately owned by a trust managed by a local real estate company. I made discreet inquiries, building contacts under the radar. I didn't want the Harrisons to get wind of my plan. At the same time, my writing career took off. My next book sold well, and the royalties started to come in. I invested wisely, stock savings, even a small side business, slowly accumulating capital. I also networked with investors who saw my vision, people who believed in my grit and determination. Months turned into a year, and the moment finally came when the property went on the market. I was ready. I made a private offer through my lawyer, an offer well above market value. The owners were impressed and accepted immediately. I held my breath as I signed the papers, finally becoming the official owner of the very beach house the Harrisons bragged about every summer. The feeling was surreal, a mix of victory, vindication, and quiet satisfaction. But I didn't stop there. I transformed the house into a private beach library and retreat, a sanctuary for writers and readers, a symbol of resilience and rebirth. When the Harrisons called their usual rental agent to book the house for their next summer vacation, they were stunned to learn that the property was no longer available, and more importantly, that they could no longer rent it. I sent them a polite but firm letter explaining that the house was now a private facility membership by invitation only. No Harrisons, no exceptions. The shock was palpable, but I saved the best for last. Along with the letter, I sent my latest book, the one that told my story in subtle but unmistakable detail. A story of a woman dismissed, belittled, and pushed to the margins who fought back with grace and strength. My mother-in-law was speechless when she received the package. Her smug smile faltered. Suddenly, the girl she had once mocked as the help was now the woman who owned the treasure they had always taken for granted. The karma wasn't loud or messy. It was quiet, deliberate, and utterly satisfying. I watched from afar as the Harrisons struggled to find alternative vacation plans. No more luxurious summers in that house. No more whispered insults. No more invisible me. And for the first time, I felt a deep peace. Not just because I had gotten my revenge, but because I had proven to myself that I was worthy, that I belonged, and that no one, not even the family I married into, could take that away from me. The following summer, when the Harrisons called to book their usual beach house, they were met with a cold, firm reply. The property is now a private library retreat and is no longer available for rent. Silence hung heavy as they faced the harsh truth they no longer had any claim to the place they once flaunted as a symbol of their wealth and status. I still remember the look on my mother-in-law's face when she received my latest book, along with a simple note written in the very house you once called me your servant. The satisfaction wasn't just in the revenge, it was in the strength I found within myself. Life isn't about the pain we endure, but how we rise after falling. Once dismissed and overlooked, I am now the woman who shaped her own destiny. My success is more than payback. It's a testament to perseverance and unbreakable self-respect. I didn't just reclaim respect. I became a source of inspiration for anyone who has ever been underestimated or belittled. We all have the power to take control of our lives and create happiness on our own terms. My story doesn't end with bitterness. It's a new beginning, a chapter written with strength, hope, and resilience.